Hugh Lytle, who's running for governor as an independent.
I'm the only businessman. I'm the only CEO in the race. I'm the only one who's really built anything, created jobs. My path to get there is based on what's right for Arizona. I would ask, go out there right now. Any of you go out and look for where is Andy Biggs? Where is Katie Hobbs' vision for Arizona? I live in a world, and I've developed a world around me where I can make the impossible possible. And that sounds braggadocious, or maybe the guy's full of himself, but I'm not. I say that humbly. I don't see career politicians trying. I see, let's get to the next election. Let's get to my next career path. Give me the chance to go out there and bring parties back together, be a uniter so that we can get things done. We got to have a way to unify two parties at the minimum, right? A lot of people say to me, God, why don't you just be a Democrat or Republican? It'd be so easy to get you in office. And I think you'd be great. I'm like, because that's not what I believe. When I look at the budget deficit and where that's and some of this fantasy revenue we're supposed to be getting in, I'm getting super nervous about where we go. You have to be able to do something to alleviate the student debt. I mean, the student debt is crushing these people before they even start their careers. I talk about an example that maybe the ESAs, we cap the ESAs, we use the money that's been used in excess, and we put it towards down payment assistance. But we've got to find ways to help people get started on the most important purchase of their life that builds equity for them at an early age. Immigration, yes. Strong border, absolutely. Do it with humanity, and then find a way to work with Homeland Security to make this a more improved process. If this were my world and this were my administration, I like to say I'd be standing in front of the tank. Okay, you do not come into my state. I don't care if you're coming federally without at least tell me what your rules of engagement are and show me who you're going after. The playing not to lose, which is what we've been doing just to get reelected, is killing us. I've always believed that the time's coming for independence.
And as much as the other side may not like it, I promise you we're not going away. Yeah. That's just not going to happen.
Destiny. You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. You and I have a rendezvous with destiny.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Hugh Lytle, welcome to the Independent Podcast. And for that matter, welcome to running as an independent candidate for governor in Arizona. That's kind of a historic thing.
That's pretty cool, Paul. Thanks for having me here. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, I have never been as impressed with a candidate. And I genuinely mean that. I've helped people in presidential campaigns and gubernatorial campaigns, but it really is your independence that to me kind of stands out in this. Now, I know, because I've been involved in politics long enough, the single biggest shot that you're probably taking right now is, aren't you just a spoiler? Because that's how everybody looks at the independent party. Meaning, what that really means to me is the Democratic Party thinks they're entitled to a fair shot against the far right-wing MAGA person, and the far right-wing MAGA person thinks they're entitled to a shot with kind of a weak candidate on the Democratic side who maybe is appealing to the far left, and any independent who gets in between it is a spoiler of that concept. But nonetheless, I imagine you're hearing that on the campaign trail. I'd like to know how you address it.
You know, funny thing, Paul, coming from business into politics, I had to do media training. I had media training when I was in business. I was in front of media all the time. Different kind of media training, right? My first day, right out of media training, I'm in front of audience, in front of media. And the number one question I get is, hey, you're a spoiler, aren't you? So this has been here since the beginning. And it's actually since Karen Taylor Robeson's kind of transition out of the race, it's really accelerated recently because it's a three candidate race. And, I'm the only businessman. I'm the only CEO in the race. I'm the only one who's really built anything, created jobs, and that's threatening. And the parties, as you know, are incredibly threatened by any competition whatsoever. So this concept of spoiler comes out. Media, people I run into, donors, et cetera, everybody, gosh, how do you win? You're a spoiler. Well, the irony in that is I'd say, okay, sure, I get that. If we were 5% of the electorate, if Arizona had 5 to 7% of independents, great. We're tops in the country, almost leading in the country number of independents. Okay, it's our nature. It's who we are in Arizona. One of our most revered leaders, John McCain, such an independent minded person, right? So just at a, call it theoretical, just at a philosophical level, that's who we are as a state. Now let's add the fact we're over 30% of the vote. We're larger than the Republican Party, larger than the Democrat Party. Okay, if you take the entirety of the independents. So first of all, you just have to look at the math. Okay, and the math says there's two things. We talk about viability as a candidate. Okay, viability for me as a candidate, can I win? I get that. Okay, that's electoral viability. But what about governance viability? We haven't talked about that yet. Okay, how do you govern when a third of the electorate's not involved in the decision? How do you build majorities? You cannot. Okay, and that's what's happening out there. So when you say, okay, am I a spoiler? Don't we have a responsibility to the structure of government to be successful? And wouldn't you as a citizen want that to happen? So I say, let's look at the math. 30% of I need to get, call it 50 to 65%. So 1 out of 2 independents who, by the way, haven't had a candidate in 25 years. Okay. Mm-hmm. And look at where we are at the divisiveness and the gridlock we are in politics today. So why would you not think that I could arguably get 1 out of 2, right? Mm-hmm. Now let's say, okay, I need to only shave off 20% on each side, on left to center, right to center. And I'm right there. We think it's about 38, 40% that wins. And my numbers are right there. So I say immediately, you got to do the math on this. Now, the other parties are not going to want to do the math. Okay. Mm-hmm. They're going to just want to say, no, that's just, it's not an impossibility. They're shaving from me or they're shaving from him. Second piece is you have to understand my path to get there. Okay. And my path to get there is based on what's right for Arizona. I would ask, go out there right now. Any of you go out and look for where is Andy Biggs? Where is Katie Hobbs' vision for Arizona? I see a lot of tactics being played. I see a lot of
no strategy.
Yeah, no strategy. So what's my strategy? Okay, so I'm focused on building Arizona to a vision in the future and doing what I do best, being disruptive, being an innovator, and changing the face of government, making Arizona, I believe that we haven't even begun to hit our potential in this state. And that's what I stand for. And I think, so when someone asks me if I'm a spoiler, mathematically I can get there, and pathwise, I've got a plan to make it happen.
Yeah, and we'll get into the strategy here in a moment, but it's just very clear to me, the two parties, you're right, they like to play up that spoiler issue instead of having to talk about real issues and vision and where it is that we're going. And it's all you have to do is take a look at Nikki Haley's race to recognize after she dropped out of the race running against Trump, she got 21% of the vote. What that means is there are a whole group of Republicans, because that was the Republican primary. There are a whole group of Republicans who want something different. Shouldn't be lost to Republicans who are free market, free trade, free enterprise, smaller federal government, who believe in an American-led world order, that there are a group of Republicans who are willing to break. But the same is true. I was a Democrat. I can promise you there are many, many pro-growth Democrats who recognize there's a progressive wing of the party who hates profit, who hate entrepreneurs. That group is willing to break, but they usually won't break for somebody in the other party because they don't like the overall value.
But don't you see that change? Just like today, I only saw the news, but in Texas, there was a primary where the Democrat won the primary, and it was mainly on a message of we're too divisive. Like, give me a shot, put me in, and give me the chance to go out there and bring parties back together, be a uniter, so that we can get things done, because Texas is the same issue we do.
All right, I want to go back. You still kind of look like a quarterback to me somehow or another. You always like to say you're good in the huddle, and I've been in the huddle with you a couple of times. I found that to be true. Yeah. A long time ago, you came to Arizona. You were a walk-on, and I believe you made the team. You were a quarterback, and before your first game, you ended up breaking your shoulder or breaking your collarbone. In that process, what I'd like to know is, from your standpoint, was that a period where you feel like there was something lost, or was it a period where there was something that was revealed to you?
That's a great question. So you probably need to know the history prior to that. So in Indiana, when I was growing up, we, for the first time ever in the state's history, we won 3 state championships in a row. I won my sophomore year, my junior year, and my senior year, state champions, all state quarterback. Okay, so honorable mention, but all state. So I'm going, okay, wow. Why would that's my identity? This is who I am, right? This is what I'm all about. So back in those days, if you wanted to go pro, which every guy like me did, you had to go to the big schools. They didn't recruit like they do today, where they can find you at a small school. There was no max preps or anything like that. So, I picked Arizona State and UCLA. I tried out at ASU and made the team, and went to Camp T and was actually trending well. I was running the number 2 offense against the number 1 defense. So that's a big honor for someone who's just kind of walked onto the team and was performing well. And then, a guy named Danny Salamua, famous nose tackle, drilled me into the ground, not on purpose, but I felt that burning sensation. I went up, I put my hand under the center, and I went, oh my goodness, right? And then they took my jersey off, I went, ooh, as they pushed the bone back in, and significantly broken collarbone. So I was pretty much out for the season. So managed to meander through a little bit of practice here and there, but overall, you can't imagine, Paul, disenfranchised, like my whole world collapsed on me. And if any of you have ever done anything like that, where you've committed so much of your time, so much of your purpose in your life to something, and then it, and you think you're on a high, and then it ends in failure like that. It was a reveal, it really was. I revealed to myself what are my priorities, what matters to me, and digging deep like that got me to say, okay, I got to turn the page. Like, I got to reinvent who I am. I need to find something else that gives me that same excitement. And that's ultimately what I ended up doing. I ended up moving into saying, okay, I'm going to get really serious and be the best I was in football, but the best I can be in business. And that's what I went after.
Yeah, I find there's this identity clarity thing that exists. And I imagine, I know athletes tend to focus on that, but I recall I was the mayor for 4 years, and I recall after I left, it was really hard for me to go into business because I felt like everything I did, I needed to do for free. So people would call me.
And have a film crew behind you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, but you have to change that mindset. I had to change that mindset to be a success in business. And for me, part of the question in this is, what fills the void when that happens? Because it's going to happen to all of us in one way or another. Our age is going to be a factor in it. What fills the void?
So let me tell you what fills the void. And this carries me. It's why I'm running, actually, is I'm a purpose. Well, 2 things. I mean, one's kind of funny. A friend of mine said to me, goes, I think you're like a rebel. Like, I root for the underdog. When Alabama's playing, Georgia, I don't care. When Alabama's playing, Alabama State, I'm going, go Alabama State. So, I've always been, I'm not big on huge institutions. I don't like bad rules. I've always been a fighter against them. So I naturally get ginned up when things are broken. And then I don't know what it is, but something in me says I can fix it. Right. So, and I've been able to do that in healthcare. I've been able to do like 3 big transformative businesses but it really, to net it out, it's about purpose. So I'm a purpose-driven person. So there's a lot of ways to do things in healthcare, make money, do whatever. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in, of course, I want to get paid my share for my work, but I am much more interested in, can I transform something? Can I take what's broken and make it better? And so I think that was ultimately the calling. When you talked to me a little bit about this potential, this party, this great opportunity, I think what triggered the most was, and my son actually telling me, hey, Dad, this is what you do. Like, you're a builder. Like, you take on hard stuff and you freaking make it happen. And I was like, kind of that, if not me, who, and if not, now I'll win. And I said, you know what, if there's ever any culmination of what I stand for in terms of pushing the edge, trying to do things different, creating transformation and reconfiguring something, it's our state government right now. And I feel like I'm incredibly qualified to do that, actually.
Yeah, and I would tell you, somebody asked me about you the other day, and I haven't had a meeting with you yet that you didn't talk about purpose. And I'm a big Viktor Frankl fan. I love Man's Search for Meaning. He talks about the concept of being an Auschwitz and family going one direction, him going the other, him thinking his family was going to live. And of course, the opposite was true. But he talked about how sometimes we put a focus on happiness, as opposed to purpose,
Mhm.
and we can't find it if we do that.
No,
Or
we can't. And I was just talking to some young kids the other day. We get a lot of young people asking me about career advice, like how do you build a career and stuff. And I said, you're not going to like what I have to say,
Mhm.
but one, you need to apprentice. You need to learn your craft. Everybody wants it too fast right now. This new this new internet world has kind of created that. However, the most important thing I said is find something that really lights you up. It doesn't mean you end up exactly there. You might end up tree branching off of that, but ultimately you will get there if you chase something that means something to you. And when you're young, it's hard to figure out exactly what that is. But I said, start there. You're gonna, because like it's that old adage, you never work a day in your life, right? So, and then it becomes a part of who you are, and then you have this satisfaction. Like I have this great satisfaction that I was able to get close to the Latino community in my
Mm.
last business. I mean, like family, like inside the living room, and I see it from a different perspective than other people do. I see how amazing that culture is, an
Mm.
amazing, upperly mobile group these people are, and how their futures in front. It's the future of our state,
Mhm.
and it gets me so excited. And I would have never had that opportunity if I sat in my office and never went out and got into the mud. And I like to ride along with the clinicians. I like to spend time in what we do, no matter how big we get. And I think that's what young people need is they need that pathway to feeling enriched by the work that they do. And I
Mm.
think that's only comes from purpose.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to go to your dad, which I will call
Mhm.
Mr. Lytle, for, an impressive individual and somebody who was. I noticed when I talked to him, he made me a little nervous. He made me feel like I had to talk more than him. He was
that
definitely
That Texas thing he's got. Yeah.
yeah. But gosh, he started an amazing company, right? Anthem Blue Cross,
Mhm.
which was about scale and size
Mhm.
and institution.
Mhm.
You grew up with that. Did that serve to give you more ambition or a dislike of institutions? What did you gain from that experience and watching your father?
I'm funny that way. I have this thing. I could be wrong on this, but just I believe that people are born with ambition or not. Like I
Mhm.
think if you've got ambition, it comes out in different ways. But if it's there and you've got a fire lit, you're gonna see that through. Uh, the ambition was always there. What he gave was mentorship and guidance, right? So, and at the time, I probably didn't appreciate it as much as I do now, looking back. But he's an incredibly intelligent man and worldly. He's just really, really broad in his knowledge of world history through anything that's tinkering. And he also taught me the discipline of focus. So my father can go strategic up here, as can I, all the way down to the nuts and bolts down here. And it was that kind of development that allowed me to reach my full potential, I guess I would say. And then I got the opportunity to work with him in a couple businesses. So, people sometimes mistake me that I was born with a silver spoon because he built Anthem Blue Cross, but he made all his money and scaled that business after I was out of high school. So we were pretty much just a middle class family. But he was a young CEO. He's only 18 years older than me. So he was like a 35, 38-year-old CEO of Blue Plan, but like he likes to say, going out of business at the time. So it wasn't the greatest gift, but he figured out how to demutualize them, convince other governors to do the same in Kentucky and Ohio, and then merge them so that they had survivability. Then they became a growth engine. But that experience was really powerful. And then I brought experience to the table from working in corporate development, where I learned how to do M&A and bring in different capital sources like private equity, where we could then all of a sudden say, let's build a thesis that helps people, that creates systemic change at scale that hasn't been done before. And then we can raise, a lot of money to go make that happen. Let's acquire companies and put them together that make that happen faster. And so that's what we did in the first couple of businesses we worked together. And no, I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. And, love my dad a ton.
Yeah,
So
he's an
yeah.
amazing man. Okay, so you've built a number of companies in your own right, and there always seems to be a purpose to those, and it's
Mhm.
oftentimes lower income people. I've
Mhm.
noticed it's been a big part of your purpose. What I'd like to know from you is um, a moment in that you had doubt, a moment in there that maybe you were humiliated or things
Mhm.
didn't work out the way that you thought they were going to work out, and you were having to transition. How did you get through that?
Yeah. So there's really two. So I would say it's both. It's uh, certainly population. So I've worked in my career. This last one around diverse and underserved communities, but I've also worked a lot with seniors. And it was our second business, Univita. where we ran into some trouble. I mean, the business just got hit. The net takeaway was we were taking risk. We were basically assuming some of that premium at the home level, and they were sending sicker and sicker people home so that they could create more profit upstream. So we were getting stuck with really, really sick people. And, we got to a really tough place in that. And then, at that point, I was asked to vacate my CEO job and become vice chairman. And I actually do a case study on this at U of A MBA program for the last 5 or 6 years on how to pick the right financial partners all around this case study, around this situation here. So the humiliation was I'd never lost, really. I mean, I'd not made the football team, and that was a transition period, but or not executed to my plan there. But I had never like not done well in business. I was like, wow, what's going on here? And that was overwhelming. But I've learned, I learned more from those losses than I ever would have if I just won every single time. And I tell you, that was a powerful thing for me. It was hard, but I think I would tell anybody out there that listens, wear your failures as a badge of pride, because there's no way you can run this life, you can run this marathon and not have setbacks. There's just no way. And I'm a person like anybody else. I mean, sometimes things don't work. And then, when I went into this last business, Equality Health, we had a theoretical philosophy of what we're trying to get done, but I didn't have anybody signing up for it. So there was some, and this is, what I often mention with other entrepreneurs is you have to sweat some payrolls. If you really want to say you're an entrepreneur, you've had to think, oh my gosh, like, am I going to have to pull from my own personal bank account to be able to fund the next payroll? And I've had to deal with that. So, so I think, it's a natural part of the process. And I've felt it as much as anybody can.
Yeah, and there's no fair weather great captains of a boat. Just doesn't happen, right?
No. Storms come,
and what I find, in owning a business and in having been in business most of my life, you can't explain it really to other people.
Yeah.
And in fact, with my employees, if I explain that to them, they'd probably be mad at me. So I have to listen to their problems and try to understand where they're coming from, as opposed to telling them mine. But there's been more than once where I've gone to bed wondering if I'm going to be able to make payroll the next week, and the embarrassment that will come from that. But that's what creates the metal. The strongest steel is forged by the hottest fire.
And if you're going to be in the arena and you have to take risk, you have to push it. And sometimes it doesn't always work out. But the other thing I would throw in that too, Paul, even in a success mode, is the hardest thing for me, and it still is, it always is having to, teams change as you scale. As you get larger, you need different people with different experiences. And sometimes saying goodbye to those people I've had to let go in the past breaks my heart every time. And these are people I spent time in the foxhole with, and I'm a very loyal guy when it comes down to it. So those are always things that even in success, you still can't get away with a free lunch, So.
All right. So I have interviewed lots of candidates over the years. And since we've done this independent party thing, I've interviewed quite a few who were interested in running. I break them up into two groups. Neither one is bad. But one simply sees the independent issue as being a political strategy, a way to try to run for office. One of the areas that you were unique on and different in the beginning was you didn't see it as a strategy. You saw it as a personal identity. You were an independent before there was an independent party. Talk to me about that. Am I right in that assessment?
100%. I mean, you can go back a little bit about what I said about how I'm wired, but I live in a world, and I've developed a world around me where I can make the impossible possible. And that sounds braggadocious or maybe the guy's full of himself, but I'm not. I say that humbly. I just know how to structure and get things done. I often say to people that, because I believe it at my core, that greatness is a series of small things done well. And you just got to do the small things well. And I've always believed that the time's coming for independence, okay? I think traditional ideology is just giving way. And it's not even, yes, the extremism, the polarization, we all know that, the vile insults, the things we're all sick of. That's part of why people are turning off their television set. The other part of it is kind of just this fait accompli. We're not going to get it done. I
Mhm.
mean, it's not happening.
Mhm.
And I don't think we have to have a whole third party necessarily. I mean, maybe we do, but I think we got to have a way to unify two parties at the minimum, right? I don't think we can just sit out there and say, we're going to figure out, we're going to have more and more people disagree with doctrine and ideology. And somehow we're going to find this magic bipartisanship. It's not going to happen.
Mhm.
And now it's proven that with executive orders and all the things that are happening anymore, it's like do and then ask questions later, weaponizing the DOJ, weaponizing of really all the branches of government. That's the beginning of the end of democracy. Okay. I mean, we cannot sit here with as fragile as we are in democracy today. When I was growing up, it was the Cold War. It was Top Gun. It was Russia. That was our threat, right? And so we've took comfort in bipartisanship and Ronald Reagan saying we got Star Wars and all these great things. That's not it anymore. It's from within, and that's the scary part. Okay, social media algorithms creating hate and division because it sells. Okay, uh, donor ecosystems rewarding extremism. Media rewarding conflict. Right, these are things that are creating and pushing on that tension. And there's a thing called the tension of the opposites. If you look up in your history, and when there's tension of the opposites, a third party always emerges, and then revolution happens, and it pulls us back to the center again in the common sense. And I think that's what's happening right now. It's happening in a little more civil way, but you're seeing. I can't tell you on the street. It's not 1 out of 2. It's 1.5 or 1.75 out of 2, unless they're 100% straight ticket partisan and bought into deep ideology that aren't saying, you know what, I'm tired of. I have to hold my nose on half the stuff now, and it just keeps morphing, and we're getting further and further apart. I'm either legislating morality or I'm on the other end, and I'm trying to tell people that 1% drives the 99% of the country. And I just think that that's where we've lost it, and people have given up on that. And I think that's why people I've come out and talked to are like, why? And once they understand this is not ego, I don't need this in my life. I don't need to be called governor. That's not. I'm happy to uh, just go on, live my life, but I have a calling and a duty and a responsibility to take the skills. Just like I'm a Presbyterian, and in my religion, you're expected to use your gifts to be able to advance whatever it is you can advance, help humanity. And in this case, that's the situation. I'm going, you know what? I'm an independent. I believe independents have their role. Today is their role. So let's stop with the spoiler stuff. Everybody knows it. Everybody feels it. It's just, can you win?
Mhm.
Can you win?
Mhm.
And I can win.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as much as the other side may not like it, I promise you we're not going away.
Yeah.
That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
But let's do a moment of disclosure here. I talk to candidates a lot,
Mhm.
and I try to talk them into running as to why they ought to get involved. Now how hard it is to run, not just run, but to run as an independent. So do two things for me. Number one, people who are thinking about running, tell them how hard it is to run as an independent, why they might want to run as a Democrat or Republican, but then tell them why they might want to run as an independent, even though it's much harder.
It's so funny because a lot of people say to me, supporters of mine, that, God, why don't you just be a Democrat or Republican? It'd be so easy to get you in office, and I think you'd be great. I'm like, because that's not what I believe. Okay, I should say I believe in both, but I don't believe in that. That's the place I'm at right now. I think for a new candidate, what I've found is what's really helped me in this is that I've done startups. Okay, I've done business, and I'm at a point in my life where I've got the resources to be able to personally contribute to doing this. Okay. This isn't like the Republican or Democratic Party. They say, hey, welcome, you win. Here's 1,000 speaking events. Here's
Your voter list.
Your voter list. Yeah, your voter list. Here's everything you need to be successful. And by the way, we'll be coming in with truckloads of money for you as well. That's not what we have here. We have you got to believe, first of all, that. Second of all, you got to be able to clearly state your position. So you can't just be a centrist. I mean, you can't just say, hey, I'm in the middle and I think common sense rules. Yeah, of course. What do you stand for?
Mhm.
Okay. And that's what I found is that I talk about what I stand for. And I think what they see is they go, wow, just like when you talked to me the first time, you couldn't win a primary. You believe in
Oh,
a lot of different things,
yeah.
but they're really balanced on whole. And they're what I believe most people think of when they go, gosh, if I have to litigate this issue. And, I would say also, if you're running as as a candidate for the first time and as an independent, it's helpful if you've had some version of responsibility. In my case, it's the CEO, and in some cases, it might be just you're on a board, a not-for-profit board, where you've got responsibilities on decision making. But you're a judge. You have to take information. You have to be a great listener, and then you have to help decide what's the right thing here, taking all people into account, and then what's the greatest good for the people of Arizona in that decision. Okay, not just a pocket of special interest, but what's the good? And I think that's where citizens have such an advantage, right? That we're here in it to advance the state. We're not in it for our own careers. And so, anyways, to answer your question, I would say it is really trying to. You have to have the resources, you have to have the know-how, you have to be willing to do like what would be the equivalent of a startup, meaning you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Okay, you're constantly uncomfortable. There's never a place where you go,
Mhm.
I got this. You got to be able to build a great team.
Mhm.
And that means also financial, right? You got to be able to put the right people in place. You got to not lose your conscience and who you are in that process. Okay. Easy to take advice, but you have to stay true to who you are. And then you have to be able to self motivate and get out there and have those discussions. I mean, you got to be really active. It's not just, phone calls to donors. It's truly like getting places where you can talk about the issues and why we're at where we're at. Those are the big ones.
Yeah, you said something to me that threw me off. I admit, even being a politician too long. Uh, you asked, I said, I'm talking about a position. I said, well, can't we learn? Now, it was like, I'm not sure that you can in politics, but that kind of takes me to this point. I think it is hard to run as an independent. In fact, if you were asking me to give you advice and you said the only thing I care about is winning, the only thing I care about is being in office, oh, you probably should run as a Democrat or Republican, just follow the normal course. Um, Andy Biggs and Katie Hobbs have spent their entire life in politics, inside the political system. If you look at the problems, and I don't lay all these at their feet, but we have a housing problem. We have an issue with college tuition pricing that's gotten out of hand. We have, all you have to do is turn on the television set and see what happened in Minnesota to recognize these two parties not only can't fix it, they may make it more dangerous for the rest of us because they can't find any common ground. What I wonder is, on your thought, you spent your life in the private sector and you're coming into this not really having any institutional knowledge of how it works in government. I suspect there are downsides to that. But I wonder whether or not people who are on the inside really can reform the system itself. And maybe that's a lesson that we can take from business, because oftentimes it's very difficult for a business to reform themselves. And when they don't reform themselves, they go out of business.
Mm-hmm.
This may need an outsider now more than ever.
I think you have to try, right? That's the thing. And I don't see career politicians trying. I see, let's get to the next election. Let's get to my next career path. And look, I would say the number one thing right now, if you were looking across and saying, okay, what differentiates me from Andy Biggs or Katie Hobbs? And that's that, one, I'm sure they love Arizona just like I do. But one, I have a vision for the state. Okay. And my vision for the state, Paul, and it's broader than this, but let's just say the key vision is that we actually catch up with our potential. We've always had this potential. I think we have the potential to blow it out. What we have going on today with the semiconductor industry, right? With TSMC being here, with the supplier economy that's developing, advanced manufacturing, data centers. What I would like to see happen is I'd like to see us bring the software. I want us to be the AI. I want us to be the innovation hub of America. There's no reason we shouldn't. We've got the climate, we've got the environment, we've got the infrastructure, we've got the hardware now. Let's bring the software in. Okay. Let's bring the best developers we can into the state, and let's create a supercharged economy. What's that do? That gives us, first of all, it's going to allow us to attract cutting edge companies that we'd never be able to attract before. It's going to allow us to increase and have high value jobs and wages that would otherwise not happen. And most importantly, it will create a robust economy for us, tomorrow's economy. that makes it a lot simpler to pay for our education problems. It makes it a lot simpler to take care of our state budget needs when we have revenue coming in that isn't just a single threaded semiconductor thing, which is wonderful, but we can really build off of this. So to be able to do that, we got to align our education system. We got to take on these big things. And this, I don't hear the candidates talking about this. And this is the part that blows my mind as an Arizonan. And that's where I get really frustrated. Okay. I say, okay, on the far right, it's like a Trump puppet. It's like whatever's going on federally, this is what we're talking about. Okay. Tell me more about how that plays into, housing issues, affordability, our water issues, our education problems that we've got to reconstruct it. That's probably the number one issue right now is making our public schools successful again, creating a high quality product.
I'm going to come back to that. I want to stick with economic development for a moment. And I agree with you. I think one of the issues that is curtailing our ability to make progress is the partisan primary. We have these partisan primaries that people end up running in. They have to go appeal. Literally, the number is to 8% of the public who tend to be more extreme than general election voters, even people in their own party who only vote in the general election. And then their districts are gerrymandered around the country. 80% of them are. So they never even have to go speak to people on the other side. But what?
Can I pause you there, sir?
Sure.
Did you guys just hear what he said? That should trouble you. Okay. This isn't us creating a party just for posterity's sake, just to have a play in politics. I'd rather be supporting another candidate who has a vision and is willing to go do that. But what you said is incredibly important. How do we, as a citizen, how do you feel about that?
From my standpoint, look, I was a Democrat, and I was a Democrat because I believed in civil rights, equal rights, and human rights. They meant a lot to me. But I also believed in property rights, and free markets, free trade, and business.
How dare you?
How dare me? Well, believe me, I got the how dare me more than once inside the Democratic Party because they didn't like that latter half, right? But the first half was so important to me that I wasn't willing to give it up. What I've seen that's happened is anymore, this is just an issue about how do you get a majority or how do you keep a majority? That's it. That's the fight, right? And so nobody's really dealing with
Paul,
the problems.
how universal and common sense does it have to be to get a majority, right? It has to be almost like common knowledge to get something like that done, unless, by the way, it's taking on a naming of a party, and then we're going to get all crazed and come together, right?
Yeah, all the major issues.
Competition,
And we're the only,
this competition, that's a whole nother thing. We'll come together very quickly. However, I mean, again, people, anyone listening to this thing, please, that should really concern you. If you're a Republican, Democrat, you should be saying to yourself, like, it should work better in this, right? So why wouldn't you give me a try, right?
Why isn't competition better?
Yeah. Let me give me a chance to take a blank sheet of paper to government and see what we can do. Because right now I can tell you what we're going to do. We're gonna have gridlock. We're gonna have bills going up the hill that are, some of them seriously ridiculous. We're gonna have appointees not being appointed because of politics. We can't get people to run things because of politics. This is such small ball. We call it in sports analogy, this is like small ball.
Yeah.
They play small ball. They play tactical games. And the fact that we're all so busy in Arizona going by our lives, but then we sit back and go, get this amazing state. Why aren't we, seems like we're doing more. Why are we not any further along, right? And then you got some great development effort like a TSMC that comes along and you go, okay, well, there's promise. And then that's what I'm saying. You've got to go out and develop that. This is a gift to us.
So let's talk about that again for a moment. I'm going to now kind of go through a series of issues with you. And the first one's economic development. Now, I can tell you, there's no doubt in my mind, if you said Andy Biggs on one side of you, Katie Hobbs on the other, and you in the middle, and people listened to the three of you and said, okay, now these are the three people that are going to go out and recruit business around the country, you would win that race, hands down, 9, maybe 10 out of 10 races, right? It just wouldn't even be an issue. In fact, I mean, I know of people involved in the economic development space that will tell you that they kind of ask Katie not to come, right? You are a type of business person that would be very good at recruiting. We've gone from being third in the country in job growth to 47th. Now, Katie likes to point out, Governor Hobbs likes to point out, look at TSMC. Yeah, but that didn't come about in your administration.
Yeah.
They came about in an administration before that. We're resting on our past successes. And today we need someone who can recruit. But I'm so sure that you're going to beat them on that topic. I don't want to talk about it. Here's what I want to talk about. You made mention of something that was very unique, I thought, which was we got to also grow our own Department of Entrepreneurship. Talk about that concept. I think that that's a very important thing that we shouldn't let go.
And they're inextricably linked. Okay, so we need to do large game hunting. And when I say large game hunting, that doesn't mean we bring Anthropic here. That mean, it would be great, but that means we bring, a 30-person new AI company that's on its rise. And I can't begin. We don't have time in this podcast, but the number of people that have come to me that are developing AI programs are phenomenal, right? And so we need to be backstopping that. We have a vested interest as a state in making sure that's successful. That's great. But the majority of Arizona companies are under 100 employees, like 80, 90% of them. They're smaller companies. That is our economy. It's also why we're so innovative, because do you live in Arizona, you got to create something. You got to make something happen if you want to live here, because you're not working, unless you're in a regional office of a larger company, you're not working here. So what I see is the state has this responsibility. In business, we work off of ROI, return on investment. So where are we placing our money? Right now, when I look at the budget deficit and where that's in some of this fantasy revenue we're supposed to be getting in, I'm getting super nervous about where we go. We have to have some short-term wins. Okay, some of that comes from just the entrepreneurial sector. But let me just succinctly say, what I would be proposing as governor is that we create an office of entrepreneurship at the governor's office, unlike anything ever seen in a nation before, where we reach deep into our own business community to support it, either through a revamped Commerce Authority, which does a good job, by the way, or through new structures. But at the end of the day, it's got to pay for itself, and then it's got to get a return. Okay, and I believe it can get a return. And here's where: first of all, we should be helping our capital support in this state. I would give it a grade of a C+. For the amount of innovation that comes out of here, the amount of talent that's in the valley. We should be layering different financing sources to help entrepreneurs either retain equity or scale with additional equity. Second is, I believe that we need to look at our strong not-for-profit sector that we have and provide them resources. These are social entrepreneurs that are creating the fabric of our communities. And they don't get any of the training, don't get any of the resources, right? So what are we doing, and capital? What are we doing to support social entrepreneurs? And then thirdly, talk about businesses that aren't making it. Don't we have a vested interest in going in and providing turnaround specialists to help those businesses not only survive and restructure, but continue to contribute to jobs in the economy? These are things we don't do today, okay? It's just like, well, I hope it doesn't go away. Well, it did, so what? Well, so what is we take a hit because it's the small business community that makes this work. So those are just some of the ideas, but the point is, you do this under a platform where we project what the cost will be to support it, and then we go out and we hustle to support these businesses and watch their productivity go up, and therefore tax revenue as well.
All right. So you also put a big focus on your economic plan on young people, trying to get young people back into the game. You're raising kids that are older. I have some that are older as well. Do you, when you look at this problem, do you think that I tend to believe we're still a very upwardly mobile country, that there's still lots of opportunity. And I'm trying to figure out, are young people actually being locked out, or are they culturally being held back? Meaning, is it their peers and others who say that they can't participate? Now, I suspect it's a little bit of each, right? Meaning that the ability to get into an asset's really important, a home, right? And there are some real economic issues that are making that more difficult. On the other hand, I also have had a company where people have asked me about, could they own a home? And I've trained a number of them about, hey, there are loans and there are all types of things that are out there. Don't just buy into the fact that you can't do it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, a few things. I mean, first I would go back before they even hit the workforce, and I would say, what are we doing to develop, call it the multiple layers of workforce alignment in education? So how are we using our how are our college and universities aligning to prepare the workforce and aligning with what workforce we have? Okay, how are they supporting that? Second, what are we doing on the vocational side? I mean, the vocations here in Arizona, those can be high paying jobs. And, I think you're going to continue to see growth and equity and money come into those in terms of roll ups or just scaling of what has been a mom and pop or fragmented business for a long time. So what are we doing to support that? And then you got to support this new developing like gig economy. Like, what do you do for people who contract workers? We have a lot of them in Arizona. And so I think it goes back to just starting there. What is the person best inclined to do, and what are their resources, and what is their interest in their path? Now, when you get to the job market, AI is going to take a chunk of those entry level jobs. We already saw that. My kids saw that. They graduated college. It's like, hey, all these entry levels are gone, or if they're there, I'm competing with people that are 2 and 3 years experienced now, and I don't look so attractive as a college graduate. They're not hiring college graduates, right? So I think it's even that much more imperative that we align the workforce so that they intern into a job. And I think that alignment and that linkage is super important. Now let's talk about like pay, right? So wages haven't kept up, right? I mean, you just talked about the numbers and where we've fallen. Goes a little bit back to what I was talking about. Where are we? We need to be building knowledge workers. We need to be on industries that are on upward trends, not downward trends, okay? And in order to do that, it's going to take economic development to make that happen. It's going to take this entrepreneurship to make that happen. It's going to take mentorship to help these kids be ready for that transition into it. And then when you get to the most important purchase of their life, right? The homes. You got to be able to take, for those that aren't participating in lower cost online and or AI driven, post-secondary school, you have to be able to do something to alleviate the student debt. I mean, the student debt is crushing these people before they even start their careers. And if they do, how are you supposed to save $70,000, $80,000 for a down payment when you've got student loans eating up the majority of it, and or your rent, which your rents are going up as well? So how do we get them started? So in my plan, I talk about how let's take money from, call it Doge efforts on the state government budget, right? Let's look at savings we can create. I talk about an example that maybe the ESAs, we cap the ESAs, we use the money that's being used in excess, and we put it towards down payment assistance. But we've got to find ways to help people get started on the most important purchase of their life that builds equity for them at an early age. And I could go on this, but that's just some
I've read your plan. Two things you also talk about there is the need to reduce regulations.
Right.
And the other issue that you talk about are some things that are out of our control, which is things like interest rates, right?
Yeah.
And down payment. Now, here's what I find to be interesting. Katie Hobbs vetoed the what was it called, the Starter Home Act, which would have reduced regulation. Actually, I would have expected a liberal Democrat to do that because they kind of like those regulations. What I will tell you from my experience in being a mayor is there is a NIMBY faction. And the NIMBY faction basically says, not my backyard. I already have a home. I'm doing great. Please don't do anything that disrupts land use or anything else. In fact, I'd like that vacant lot to stay a vacant lot.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not really good for our young people who are trying to get into a home. That makes it more difficult. On the other hand, we have Andy Biggs, who argues that he's been a conservative, but at the federal level, he passed some pretty big budget busting bills that ended up raising the amount of money the federal government's spending, which has an effect on long-term interest rates. If you really want to lower long-term interest rates, lower the amount of money the federal government's spending. The point I'm giving here is, I think this takes me back to this issue of, I don't think the two parties can fix it. I think they're stuck in these modes where it's more important, are you anti-Donald Trump or are you pro-Donald Trump? Mm-hmm. It's more important, are you following the constituencies that vote in a primary, or are you willing to break out of it? They're so stuck in a mold, they're not going to be able to really tackle a problem like this one.
Yeah, it's funny. I can't believe we're at a time where we're talking about the Republicans being the party of big government, right? Mm-hmm. But now we are.
It's a horseshoe. They say politically, they kind of come back together at the other end.
It's kind of crazy. So but yeah, I would agree, Paul. I mean, I think we I talk a little bit about we're going to have to try some unorthodox things is what it's going to come down to, right? And that's why I try to talk a little bit about that on my website, HughLytle.com. But what I think, I have this idea called touchdown towns. Okay, like you just go in, let's figure out how to work with the towns themselves on the zoning, and first have a philosophical discussion about why it's important to have low income housing, which by the way, or lower income housing, I should say, that by the way is fairly attractive now. Some of these modular homes, if you've seen them, and these are nice looking plots, but it gives that person the opportunity for that starter home, right? So, and you have an industry who's done well. Why aren't they helping create incentives, right? We should figure out a way to do public-private incentives to be able to support reduce the cost of that first early home entry. Now, interest rates can't do a lot about that necessarily, but I certainly think if we can figure out a way to lower the home price, we can at least be in a better situation, get more people in the houses.
And you're right, it's a leadership issue, because what I saw, look, I love the mayors and councils. They're a nonpartisan group of people. I've worked with them for years, and I was one. But I know this is true. For the most part, they want McMansions. Any new homes that are being built, they want McMansions.
Yeah.
And it's because politically it's easier to get a McMansion than it is to say, okay, how do we go build entry-level homes? I'm not talking about subsidized housing.
Yeah.
I'm talking about entry-level homes for firefighters and teachers and police officers. You take a home from $300,000 to $400,000 in today's interest rates, that's the difference between a nurse and a doctor.
Well, and we have to get over this in certain areas, not everywhere, but we certainly got to get over this density issue too, because for God's sakes, I mean, we're not Tokyo. We just need to be able to create. No one's talking about killing off views. I think we're talking about keeping the heights reasonable, but you have to have some density in urban environments to be able to support the housing needs of the people who live there, right? And I think leaving it to kind of the current process is not getting it done. So.
All right, so let's go to water just for a moment, because that's another area where I see the partisan differences are greatly different than even when I was in office years ago. So, it's not lost on me. Andy Biggs thinks that the problem's California, because you have Gavin Newsom, who may run for governor, and he wants to blame them. The governor, I don't quite know who she's blaming, but in many ways, I think she's just been missing in action.
She's MIA,
right?
Yeah.
There's also no doubt in my mind that this is a big problem between upper basin states and lower basin states. And the upper basin states are going to have to take some of this pain. Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble. And if this EIS that's been issued by the current secretary under Trump ends up being issued, 77% of the pain comes on to Arizona. That's highly problematic. But here's the story I want to tell you, because I'm going to put this back on leadership as opposed to there just being a functional water issue. There is a functional water issue, but there's been one for a long time. So Barry Goldwater tells me this story years ago where Carl Hayden goes into his office and says, come on, we're going to go meet with Lyndon Johnson. We're going to try to get the CAP passed. So he takes Barry Goldwater into the office with the president, and the president comes in and he says, now, Carl was a deal maker. He says, now, Carl, he says, you'd have to tell me why the hell I would ever vote for that CAP project you people have in Arizona. He says, to begin with, he says, I'm a Democrat. He says, and he said, I get most of my money out of Vegas, and they're opposed to this thing. And then I get most of my votes out of California, and they're opposed to this thing. He says, and you're sitting next to the son of a bitch who's probably going to run against me. He says, now, why in the hell would I ever vote for that? Barry Goldwater says, Carl Hayden takes this big old stogie out of his mouth, and he hits the ash up on the floor of the Oval Office. He says, why, Lyndon, because you owe me. Cigar back in his mouth. And Barry Goldwater says, Lyndon looks over at him and he says, I hate it when he puts it that way. But here's the point. We had years of leadership. Barry Goldwater, Carl Hayden, Morris Udall, people who spent their lifetimes, for that matter, John Rhodes and John Shattuck, who spent their lifetime building leadership. They did a great job of that, and they worked across the aisle. When I became mayor, I had multiple Republicans in leadership positions who came into me. I was a Democrat and said, hey, we're going to oppose you in the election, but we want to help you be a success as mayor. Right? It crossed the party lines, but that's breaking down. And this is where I think an independent really can play a unique role that hasn't been played by not walking through the door with the blue team or the red team, but instead by focusing on the problem.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the playing not to lose, which is what we've been doing just to get reelected, is killing us. And this is a great example of it. Okay, in business, I want to believe this happens at the state house, but not sure. But in business, you sit down and you have a strategic plan. You go to your strategic plan, but you have critical success factors. Those critical success factors are what are absolutes, and I can tell you number one absolute always cash. No matter what it is, no matter what size business you are, grocery store up through General Motors, it doesn't matter. Cash is king. Cash is everything. And so what you do is you prioritize that, right? So we get a weekly cash report. We're always talking about that cash report. We're staying on top of that cash report. Now, where did water somehow disappear? It's been a problem for a long time.
Mhm.
If I were governor, I took over, I would sit down with my cabinet and I would say, let's talk about these critical success factors. How are we monitoring this on a day-to-day basis? How do we know where we're at? That's leadership, right? That's we may not be able to win everything, and I would be okay if our administration said, "Hey, this is what we've been fighting. Here's what we've been proposing back and forth. Here's where we're at." But there's no transparency. There's no anything. It's just, "Hey, we're extending the timeline. We're extending the timeline." Like, and oh, by the way, here's a projection of how much you're going to lose, and we're going, "Wait, we've got produce. We produce half the nation's produce at times in the year. We've got this, alfalfa. We've got defense industry. We've got things that require water. We're going to talk about being a semiconductor and AI hub. Even though they talk about reclamation, we have to be in a position to be successful with water. Period. Especially being a lower basin state, right? So that's my cash report. My cash report is where are we at with water at any point in time. And from the moment I step in office to the moment I leave, and I hope I leave it in better hands the next time someone takes it. But that is to me, again, as a citizen sitting out going, where are we on that? And why are we so late to the party? And even if there has been actions, right? My responsibility as governor is to make sure we're communicating about it, right? So that this is not a surprise to everyone. And to me, that's, borderline negligence. So.
Yeah, they have to work overtime at showing that they're willing to cross the aisle, and the public is going to need to enforce it, because what's happened in our political system, it's so driven by polling and partisan primaries that people are making choices not based upon our best long-term
And it's not being
interest.
talked about. We're not talking about education, not talking about this water issue, right? Because it politically may not sound good for my election. And then, you've got, on the far right, we've got, Trump supporting the upper basin. So where's the fight there? Where's the, hey, wait a minute, that's not good for my state of Arizona. Don't hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So one of the things that I've seen in education that I find to be interesting, let's focus on K through 12 for a little bit, is this whole concept of over a long period of time, I've seen that Democrats tend to want more money, but they rarely want reforms. They seem to oppose almost every reform that comes by them. On the other hand, Republicans tend to want reforms, but they almost never want more money. Right? There's always an excuse as to why it doesn't need more money. We're also now seeing this in this ESA debate, right? Katie Hobbs and Democrats are talking about how this does damage to our overall traditional school. And you have Republicans who are talking more about freedom of choice. And here's the tension that I'm interested in. Do you see competition in schools as a pressure to try to improve education? Or is it really about giving parents choices? How do you weigh that? Or are they both equally important
This
to
is
you?
by far, Paul, to me, the most complex issue of anything I've studied in Arizona so far. And I'll qualify it this way. I'm still learning. Okay. I would nowhere near say I'm ready to lay down policy and or be able to weigh in on what the right answer is yet. I can tell you one thing for sure. There are a lot of buried bodies, a lot of dead carcasses along the side of the road of initiatives tried, people well-intended. Everybody's well-intended here. But it does come down to philosophy. Let me tell you my core philosophy. My core philosophy is this. I personally don't like the break. I support public schools. I do not like the breakdown of the neighborhood. It's the neighborhood and the community that makes us special. It's what enriches our lives. It's our health and our wealth are right there in our community, right? And when people get up in the morning and drive 13 different places to 13 different schools, that starts to break down that fabric. Then you throw in gentrification of homes, et cetera. And then all of a sudden we've got different property values. We got mixed neighborhoods, and all of a sudden it falls apart. So do I think school choice is important? Yeah, you got to put a competitive product on the field. If you don't have a competitive product, people are going to do what's best for their kid. And I 100% agree with that. But at the same time, I say, what's the plan though to make our schools competitive? So as a parent, I go, I don't want to do that anymore. My kid's missing out on all the amazing things that go on in my community and what goes on at my school. And by the way, 3 kids got into Harvard last year, so-and-so, et cetera. The performance is actually lifting up. And so I think you'll see a momentum shift now, and you'll have a healthy balance at that point. I don't think we have the depth of charter and private we'd even need if we were to fully engage that. But it's inequitable. When I look across the system, it's inequitable. The funding at any level is not enough. It's certainly not enough funding, not even close. Teacher pay is not even teacher pay, it's entry-level teacher pay. Start out teacher pay. When you can work at Chick-fil-A for the same price, why don't you take the headache of all the work that goes with being a teacher? So I believe there's got to be ways to create like master level teaching levels so that there's a career path to 6 figures as a teacher. I believe the system needs to reward that based on performance, right? I believe until we figure out a better solution, we need to be able to offer that. And I think I speak for everyone when I talk about ESAs. I mean, ESAs are important. If your child's special needs, or if you have you prefer homeschooling, you should be able to have that option. But I think clearly the accountability needs to be fixed there. And I think most people around that rationalize that. I'm not sure that, I know we're trying to maybe get it into the Constitution without the accountability. I don't think that's a good idea, but we need to kind of fix that program. And I still think that personally, I think that program should be means tested. I don't think it's intended for people of means to be able to I think the money should go where it needs to go. That being said, there's a lot of work to be done on how do we teach our children? How do we, from early childhood development to 9th grade and beyond, how are we ensuring that they're keeping up? How are we ensuring that they're meeting those curves? And there's a lot to unwind in that.
Yeah, I've heard you give this argument before, and I've liked it. I mean, the idea of ESAs being given for parents who are homeschooling, and then there be them not having to take the same test that someone would in traditional school or in a charter school, that is problematic. And them not having some rules around what can you spend this money on. You've made mention of both of those. What I'm really interested in, though, is that has been your comment that relates to your child went to a charter school.
Mhm.
I'm a big supporter of charters, especially Basis. Now, Basis is a really hard school, and a lot of kids end up losing out at 5th or 6th grade because they can't keep up.
Yeah.
But I can also tell you, my grandkids that went there that were in 5th or 6th grade, they knew more in 5th or 6th grade than any school that they went back to. It was really off the charts good. But the point that you've made that to me is one that we really should be spending more time thinking about. You made partly the point here is, how do we take those standards in those charter schools and bring them back to traditional schools that are having to close their door? 100,000 people or less in our traditional schools over the last 10 years. Now, some of that was childbirth, but a lot of it was because they were concerned about safety. They were concerned about teachers having control over their classrooms.
Right.
That, to me, seems to be a project that's worthy of taking on.
100%. And I think so if you take that very concept, I talk a little bit about charter-inspired frameworks. So charter can be a polarized or electric word because there's been good and bad in the charter system. I want to talk about the good, okay? And at the good level, the alignment with parents, the alignment with discipline and structure, the alignment with student empowerment, these are great things, right? My kids went to a Great Hearts, and which was more of classic education, but they learned humane letters. They learned debate. They learned how to have a logical and rational and civil debate with someone. I think we could all use that today, right? And I do believe that there is room for even looking at the curriculum on how we teach STEM, how we teach classic education, but how we also continue to focus aggressively on our reading comprehension and English immersion, which are important. Most of our public schools are Latinos.
Mhm.
We've got to be able to help get the importance, getting the standards into those schools where they can be successful. And that comes, Paul, to my last big point on this, which is the money, right? And so, first of all, there needs to be more of it. Second of all, it needs to be more localized, I believe. The money seems to be in collected high and caught up in a lot of administrative layers that would be better used locally. These teachers, the fact that a teacher has to come out of pocket for something is still mind blowing to me at today's day and time. But it happens all the time, right? Just because they care so much about their craft and about teaching these children. So I think the opportunity for us to relook at the distribution of funds and then create call it a better schedule of financial distribution based on need would go a long way.
All right, I'm going to hit some issues real quick because we're running out of time. So I'll just hit maybe one question in each area. Healthcare ideology versus cost cutting. So we have, again, Andy Biggs at a national level has voted to repeal the ACA without any fully funded or fully thought through replacement plan. Katie Hobbs talks about fully funding Medicare, but the reality is it's being fully funded by the federal government. And right now it looks like there are going to be cuts and it's going to be problematic. Here's my interesting issue on this one. It seems like everybody focuses on the way that you pay for it, and no one really focuses on the cost. You've created a business that was focused on that. What are the things that you think that we could do, at least thematically, that might really begin to make a difference on healthcare?
First, let me just say healthcare is complicated. I mean, it is a complex topic. I spent a career in it, and every day still learn something new. Um, I'm obviously disappointed. The Republicans haven't had a plan in a few decades now on what to do with healthcare, and just giving the money in an HSA is not going to solve our problem. So I think government's got to play a bigger role. And at the state level, what we can control, anyways, is I think there's a way. The business I had and what I think I see a lot of promise in is paying for the outcome versus paying the fees, the fee for service, we call it, the individual bills. That's a volume over value dynamic, right? And I think we would want, what I would want to do in my administration is I want to look at the proliferation of value based across our Medicaid program, for example. So, in our case, we saved 7% over a 5-year period and improved quality and lowered cost. That ends up, if you took that across the full entire book of Medicaid, that's billions of dollars that could be improved. It could go to the state to improve the services that we have there. I think we need to modernize the program as well and take some of the cost out of it. I also think that we need to use more technology, and we got to really focus on rural healthcare right now. I mean, our rural has got cut back yet again. Automation is going to have to become more important there. Teleconsults, being able to use telemedicine in a more promising way so that people have greater access. And then, workforce development. It still comes down to not enough people to take care of the aging population. That's just real. And so we have to find a way to work at top of license. So I'd probably look at state licensure as well and say, what could we be doing to advance care for people?
On immigration reform, it seems that the Republicans really care about the rule of law and enforcing the border. That seems to me to be legitimate. Democrats seem to be about the rule of law in terms of how you treat people locally. I'm fascinated by the fact that you have to, if you pick one of the two parties, you have to give up the other. When, for the most part, I think the American public kind of wants both. And they're not, the reason that Trump's polling numbers has gone so far down is because they see that they're losing one half of that equation. How do you see the problem?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I even talk to, Latinos. I'm close to numerous Latinos that are talk to me about this very topic, and they're on board too. Like if you're not here and you haven't, if you're in process and you're trying, that's the hard part. If you're a dreamer or if you're someone who's in process, you got to give them a chance. But if you felony out, then you felony out. You got to move back. You got to be deported. So keep your nose above board and get the paperwork done. Give a little more time. Treat them with humanity on getting that done. But we got to have a strong border. Period. I mean, what happened and historically here, where we've just kind of opened the borders, has been tragic, and we're now having to clean up that mess. The way we've gone about it is not something I agree with. I don't like the way this ICE program has been handled. No one does, I think. It's getting more universal now, and we do see them starting to kind of cut back a little bit on that approach. But, families that are, you look at the numbers of people who are actually criminals. I like to say that they should be going after the gangsters, not the gardeners. But, we're rounding up everybody. And then we're saying, okay, which ones we stick, which one. And that's just, horrible. We have Arizona families, hardworking, Latino families, living in fear, being afraid to go to Circle K, being afraid to go to Home Depot for fear of just going through the process, right? I don't want to get picked up. I've got my papers. Doesn't matter. You're going with us.
Mhm.
And that's unacceptable. So immigration, yes, strong border, absolutely. Do it with humanity, and then find a way, work with Homeland Security to make this a more improved process. I will tell you this, though. It's the governor's responsibility, right? The governor needs to be out front. If this were my world and this were my administration, I like to say I'd be standing in front of the tank. Okay, you do not come into my state. I don't care if you're coming federally, without at least tell me what your rules of engagement are and show me who you're going after. Okay, we'll help you, but do not come in here expecting, calling on businesses, dragging kids out of school. I think that kind of stuff.
And I think that was one of the mistakes of Katie, which was passing a bill that didn't allow coordination of local governments with the federal government to get rid of the bad guys. I think that coordination is something that people expect.
Yeah.
But everything, again, is being driven by, are you for Trump, or are you against Trump, as
Right.
opposed to, hey, how do we try to get to both?
No, I get it. This is the Trump derangement syndrome, but it's also this dynamic of, I understand. I have a lot of MAGA friends, and I get it. They're basically like, we had to put up with all this wokeism and all these things. We had no voice, and now we got a guy who punches back, and it feels great.
Yeah.
And so I get that. But when do you draw the line? When do you say, okay, maybe this is turned into an authoritarian style government? Maybe it's so populist centered that we've lost our way. Okay. And these are very smart, common sense, rational, taxpayer, fantastic people. And I know they care more about people than that. I know they know. Look, it doesn't matter if I like it or not. Same thing with education. When I talk about AI is coming, democratization is coming, you can't stop it. Same thing here. Latinos are minority majority. It's just a matter of time for they're the majority in the state. And what do you think is going to happen? They're going to have people elected. And then when they're elected, they're going to say, hey, why are we doing these crazy things? So let's get on board now and welcome what is a wonderful immigrant community.
But you see this over and over again, and I'm going to return to this kind of as our closing, which is the inability for the two parties to solve this problem. Katie Hobbs voted against an anti-Semitic act that would have stopped anti-Semitism in schools. Andy Biggs voted against a bill that would have stopped violence against women. Now, you go, those are crazy. How could that be? And you go back and you can look at the bills and you can listen to their excuses. But here's what you'd find out if you dug into it. There are constituencies in both of their primaries who were motivated to vote against them if they voted for those bills.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and it's disproportional, right? That you have such a small group of people voting in the primary that you cannot ignore that group of people. If you look at Andy Biggs on the 2020 election, right? He voted to certify or to decertify Arizona's 2020 electors because theoretically they believed that there was fraud inside the election. I don't think he really believed there was fraud in the election, but he wasn't going to cross Trump and he wasn't going to cross the Republican Party. Our governor today on the issue of independence, not only is she fighting is on the name. Look, it takes 6,000 signatures to run as a Republican or Democrat. It takes 45,000 to run as an independent. The only reason we want the independent name is to say to that group of people, you have access. All right, that's really what we're trying to do. I don't think the Democrats are any more are any stronger on election reform and trying to make certain that we're getting corruption out of the system than the Republicans are. But as an independent, you can look at this from a different point of view. You can look at ways to try to make certain that we're improving the strength of our democracy while also not alienating people in the process. We can be both for civil rights and equal rights and human rights, as well as property rights, free markets, and free trade.
People are ready for that, Paul. I mean, I think what you said is spot on, and where that might have passed right over them, people notice now. Okay, but here's the question. This is the thing I would say to anyone listening in: is when do you say that's enough? When do you say, okay, you know what? Now's the time to not let that happen anymore. And look, you need transparency here. You got to be able to show what you do. And so, under my approach to legislation, it would be, we would be focused on issue coalitions. We'd be focused on scorecarding those publicly, and having people who chair these things that actually know something about the subject, and get out of the kind of caucus mindset that we have. And then you would see where I would come out on, and I would share that with the public, and it have nothing to do with any particular base that I've got to sell to in order to solve it. It's just what is good for the majority of Arizonans on this topic.
All right. So here are my negative questions for Hugh, right? I'm not a journalist, but, maybe I'll try to fake it here just for a few minutes.
You've dealt with a few of them.
Yeah, that's true. So here's the first question. Power is a really funny thing, and all of us have weaknesses. Now, I happen to believe that the balance of power is important because it helps moderate the weaknesses inside of each of our personalities. But from your standpoint, what's the thing that you worry about in yourself that you think that you'll have to keep a check on if you became governor to be a good governor?
I think that for me would probably be the fact that, I'm a performance guy. Okay. I'm a builder. I create things, and then I set strong timelines, and I expect to perform. I expect to see that performance hit. And I think government doesn't work at that speed. I think government doesn't have a hand-picked team that I get to go out and take individual selection over. I have to work with people elected to the legislature. And so I think that's the biggest part, is like, how do I be able to get things done that I feel like are absolute priorities for the state in the time I've.
Are there things that even the last year, last 5 years, that you've genuinely changed your mind about, that you say, okay, I thought this, but maybe I wasn't right on it?
No, I mean, the big one is, I would say probably just the political divide. I mean, I thought it was something that just couldn't change, at the end of the day. I wanted to believe it could, and I put my name in the hat hoping that would happen. But, I got to tell you, Paul, I've only been out a month, but over the last month, I'm starting to see cracks in the wall. I'm starting to see people, it's a process. They have to go through, again, can the guy win, right? But boy, if he can win, holy cow, what would that mean, right? And then I see him build. I see him get excited, right? And then they go back to, can he win, right? And I'm like, okay, but what if if you get behind me, you can. But if you don't, what are you left with? The status quo going to work? It's not.
Yeah, it's look, I've been dealing with this for a while, and it's when you talk to people and they're losing faith. They're losing the belief that we can make things better. Your hope, but man, it's hard to buy into it. Down deep, they want to start with the belief we can't fix it. You're just a spoiler. There's no way for you to win. But I see the same thing over and over again.
But Paul, let's say I don't show up. There's no one there. No one's running. You know what you got, and you just get more and more disenfranchised. Is that what you want? Or do you say, this is the time? You know what? I mean, hopefully, I seem like a reasonable guy, right? I've got experience. I've built things. I've done things in my life. Why would you not take that chance now? What's status quo going to get you? We know what we're going to get on a far right guy. We know what we're going to get with existing governor. Look at the lane I can create here. Look what I can do with my vision for Arizona. Look what I can do to bring us to both purpose and prosperity. Wow, I sound like a politician. But that is truly what I think.
Last issue. Your kids are going to look back at this one day. If you're governor, they're going to look back at it one day. What do you hope you can prove to them?
I hope I can prove to them that, and it's the whole reason I ran too, that be convicted in your beliefs. Okay. Do your research, understand what's at stake. And then my favorite movie is, from a leadership perspective, is Braveheart. Be a servant leader. Hopefully my kids will look back and go, my dad dove in, man. Like, he saw stuff was broke and he dove in. And that's what I want my kids to be able to do. Help society, be human, be focused on improving the condition of your community.
So, Hugh, I will just end by saying this. I was the first one to talk to you about doing this, and you were a no. It needs you right now. It needs you now more than ever. And I just can't tell you how proud I am of being here with you, supporting you, and to tell you thank you for.
Thanks for asking me. I appreciate it.
I guess I should say one last thing, which is let people know how they can get in contact with you, how they get through to your website, and if they want to give a contribution, how do they do that?
So, first of all, go to HughLytle.com and learn more about me. We're still developing. I'll have a Hugh AI up soon, which will allow you to interface with me like we're doing today. Ask me questions directly. And then also follow me, if you would, on social media, at Hugh for Governor, on any social media platform. Ask your kids to follow me on TikTok. And then, these campaigns take financial resources. I mean, that's the reality. But please know that those financial resources are helping you create a better state. That's what I'm here for. Not for me personally. I've already put up a lot of my money. This is about let's create change. And to do that, you can go directly to my HughLytle.com website, donate there, or feel free to give us a call on that, and we'll connect you with people who will take care of it.
Thanks again. Thank you for being with us today.
And we stand today on the edge of a new frontier, the frontier of unknown opportunities and perils. It holds out the promise of more sacrifice instead of more security. The new frontier is here.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.